The champagne was a vintage Dom Perignon 1998, chilled to perfection, but the betrayal served alongside it was ice cold. 500 of New York's elite sat in the pews of St. Patrick's Cathedral, waiting for the wedding of the decade. They expected vows of eternal love between billionaire heir Julius Thorne and the lucky scholarship girl, Elise Vance. What they got instead was a masterclass in vengeance. When the bride stepped up to the altar, she didn't just bring a bouquet, she brought receipts. And when the dust settled, the groom's reaction would shock the world more than the affair itself. This wasn't just a wedding. It was an execution. The air inside the bridal suite at the Plaza Hotel smelled of expensive hairspray, white lilies, and suppressed hysteria. Elise Vance sat before the vanity, staring at her reflection. The woman in the mirror looked like a princess from a storybook. Her skin porcelain, her eyes wide and shimmering, her figure draped in a custom Vera Wang gown that cost more than her childhood home. But beneath the layers of silk and lace, Elise felt like a soldier suiting up for war. "You look stunning, Elle," Isabella, her maid of honor and best friend since their days waiting tables at a diner in Queens, whispered. Isabella adjusted the diamond tiara on Elise's head, her hands trembling slightly. "Are you sure you want to do this? We can still run. My Honda is parked out back. We could be in Jersey by noon." Elise's lips curled into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. "Run? Bella, I've spent 2 years running around trying to please Victoria Thorne, running errands for a family that treats me like hired help, running away from the truth. Today, I stop running. Today, I burn the house down." Outside the suite, the world of the Thorne family was in full swing. The Thornes were not just rich, they were American royalty. Julius Thorne, the groom, was the heir apparent to Thorne Enterprises, a conglomerate that owned everything from shipping lines to tech startups. He was handsome in that brooding old money way, dark hair, jawline cut from granite, and eyes that usually held a spark of mischief but lately seemed clouded with exhaustion. Then there was his mother, Victoria Thorne. Victoria was a woman made of steel and Botox. She was currently in the hallway, barking orders at the wedding planner, a poor woman named Sarah, who looked on the verge of a stroke. "I said cream roses, not ivory," Victoria hissed, her voice low and venomous. "Do you want this wedding to look like a common affair? My son is marrying a nobody. The least we can do is ensure the aesthetics don't scream poverty, even if the bride does." Standing next to Victoria, looking smug in a dress that was arguably too white and too bridal for a guest, was Chloe St. James. Chloe was the daughter of a senator, a childhood friend of Julius's, and the woman Victoria had always intended for her son. She was blonde, bubbly, and about as genuine as a $3 bill. "Don't worry, Victoria," Chloe said, placing a manicured hand on the older woman's arm. "Julius knows what he's doing, or he will soon enough. It's a shame, really. Elise is a sweet girl, just tragically out of her depth." Inside the suite, Elise heard the muffled voices. She picked up her phone. The screen displayed a series of photos sent to her only 3 days ago. They were grainy, taken from a distance, but clear enough. Julius's car, a hotel in the Hamptons, Chloe getting into the car, Chloe and a man on the balcony, their silhouettes merging into one. Elise's heart had shattered when she first saw them, but grief had quickly calcified into rage. She stood up, the heavy satin of her dress rustling like dry leaves. "Is the projector set up?" Isabella nodded, her face pale. "Yes. I bribed the AV guy with $500 and a bottle of scotch. He thinks it's a sentimental montage of you and Julius growing up. He has no idea. Good, Elise said, grabbing her bouquet. It was heavy, concealing the small microphone transmitter taped to the stems. Let's go get married. The ceremony was held at St. Patrick's Cathedral, a venue secured by a donation from the Thorne family that could have funded a small country. As Elise walked down the aisle, the organ music swelled, filling the cavernous space. The pews were packed with heavy hitters, politicians, tech moguls, socialites. They all turned to look at her. Usually, this is the moment the bride feels a wave of love. Elise felt only the cold clarity of a sniper taking aim. She looked at the front row. Victoria Thorne was dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief, performing the role of the proud mother perfectly. Next to her sat Andrew Thorne, Julius's father and the CEO of the company. Andrew looked bored, checking his watch, clearly ready to get back to the boardroom. And there was Chloe, seated right behind the family, smirking. And finally, Julius. He stood at the altar, looking devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo. As Elise approached, his eyes locked onto hers. He didn't smile. He looked intense, almost worried. He reached out a hand to help her up the steps. His grip was firm, his palm warm. "You look beautiful," he mouthed. For a split second, Elise wavered. Does he know? Does he love me? Or is he the best actor of them all? Then she looked over Julius's shoulder and saw Chloe wink at Victoria. The hesitation vanished. The priest began the ceremony. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." The words washed over Elise like static. She was waiting for the vows, the moment of truth. The script she had written in her head was about to override the liturgy. If anyone here knows of any just cause why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever. Hold your peace. The cathedral went silent. This was usually a formality, a pause for effect. Victoria Thorne cleared her throat loudly, a sound that echoed in the silence. It wasn't an objection, just an assertion of dominance, a reminder that she was watching. Elise took a deep breath. She turned to the priest. "Father, if you don't mind, I'd like to say a few words before the vows. A special tribute to the family I'm marrying into." The priest looked confused but nodded. "Of course, my child." Victoria sat up straighter, her eyes narrowing. This wasn't on the schedule. Elise turned to the congregation. She handed her bouquet to Isabella and stepped up to the microphone. "Thank you all for coming," Elise began, her voice steady, amplified through the massive speakers. "When I met Julius, I didn't just fall in love with him. I fell in love with the idea of family. Being an orphan, I craved that connection. And the Thornes, well, they certainly are a close-knit group." She smiled at Victoria. Victoria didn't smile back. "They taught me so much about loyalty," Elise continued, "about keeping secrets, about doing whatever it takes to get what you want. And in honor of that honesty, I prepared a little video presentation to celebrate the love that exists in this room today." She signaled to the AV booth. The lights in the cathedral dimmed. A massive screen descended behind the altar. Victoria leaned over to Andrew. "What is this trash? Did she make a slideshow of their vacation photos? How pedestrian." Andrew grunted. "Let her have her moment, Victoria. The sooner this is done, the sooner the merger goes through." The screen flickered to life. But it wasn't a montage of Elise and Julius's childhood. It was a security camera feed. The timestamp was from 2 weeks ago. The location? The private study of the Thorne estate. The video on the massive screen was crisp, high definition. The sound, captured by a high-fidelity system, meant for corporate espionage, boomed through the church. On screen, Victoria Thorne was pacing the study, holding a glass of whiskey. Chloe St. James was sitting on the leather desk, swinging her legs casually. "He's going to go through with it, Victoria," Chloe's voice rang out, magnified 1,000 times. The real Chloe, sitting in the pew, turned ghostly pale. A murmur rippled through the guests. "Not if we push her out," the on-screen Victoria snapped. "I've already planted the jewellery in her apartment, the sapphire necklace. When it goes missing next week, and the police find it in her sock drawer, Julius will have no choice. He can't marry a thief." The guests gasped. Victoria froze in her seat, her hand clutching her pearl necklace as if trying to strangle herself. She looked around wildly, but the darkness of the church pinned her in the spotlight of the screen. "That's risky," on-screen Chloe laughed. "Julius loves her. He might forgive a little theft. You need the nuclear option. You need him to think she's cheating." "I'm working on it," Victoria replied, taking a sip of whiskey. "But you need to do your part, Chloe. Have you slept with him yet? We need photos." Chloe sighed on screen. "I'm trying, but he's obsessed with the little orphan. He won't let me near him. I've tried the drunken late-night calls, the accidental nudity in the pool house. Nothing. He's loyal. It's disgusting." "Then fake it," Victoria commanded. "Drug him if you have to. Get him in a bed, take a picture, and send it to Elise. Shatter her." The video cut to black for a second. The church was dead silent. 500 people were holding their breath. Elise stood at the altar, looking down at her mother-in-law. "I found that recording on a cloud server you forgot to secure, Victoria. You really should change your passwords more often. Victoria Queen 1 isn't very hard to guess." Victoria stood up, her face a mask of fury. "Turn it off. This is deepfake. This is AI. She's lying." "Sit down, Mother," Julius said. His voice was low, but it carried. He hadn't moved. He hadn't looked at the screen. He was looking at Elise. "Julius!" Victoria shrieked. "She is humiliating us." "I think you did that yourself," Elise said calmly. "But wait. There's more. You see, when I found that video, I was heartbroken. I thought, poor Chloe, forced into this scheme by a manipulative old woman. But then I dug a little deeper. I hired a private investigator, a very expensive one. And what he found? Well, that's the real love story of today." Elise signaled the booth again. The screen lit up. This time it was a series of photographs. The first photo showed Chloe. But she wasn't with Julius. She was at a fertility clinic. The second photo showed a medical document, a paternity test. The third photo showed Chloe kissing a man passionately outside a secluded boutique hotel in Chelsea. The man's face was clearly visible. It wasn't Julius, it was Andrew Thorne, the groom's father. The collective gasp in the cathedral sucked the oxygen out of the room. Andrew Thorne, who had been checking his watch moments ago, went rigid. His face turned a shade of grey, usually reserved for corpses. Elise's voice cut through the shock. "Victoria, you were so busy trying to get Chloe into Julius's bed that you didn't notice she was already in your husband's. And that baby you're so excited about? The heir you thought Chloe would eventually give Julius. It's not your grandchild, Victoria. It's your husband's bastard," Chloe screamed. It was a primal, terrified sound. She jumped up from her pew. "It's a lie! He doctored the photos." "The DNA test is notarized, Chloe," Elise said, pulling a document from her bodice. "I have copies for everyone if they want them as party favors." Victoria turned slowly to look at her husband. The look on her face was not one of sadness. It was the look of a predator realizing it has been wounded by its own pack. "Andrew?" she whispered. "You. And her? Andrew stammered, loosening his tie. Vicky, please. It was a lapse in judgment. She seduced me. She said she could help us with the merger. By sleeping with you, Victoria roared, forgetting the crowd, forgetting the church. She slapped Andrew across the face, the sound echoing like a gunshot. You senile old fool! I arranged for her to marry our son, and you were sleeping with her? He's better in bed than Julius anyway, Chloe yelled, deciding to burn it all down. At least he pays attention to me. Julius is too busy pining over this charity case. The chaos was absolute. The guests were murmuring. Some were even recording on their phones. The priest had retreated behind the altar. Elise stood in the center of the storm, feeling a strange sense of peace. She had done it. She had exposed the rot at the heart of the Thorne dynasty. She took off her engagement ring, a massive 10-carat diamond that felt like a shackle, and placed it on the lectern. I think we can skip the vows, Elise said into the mic. I don't think I want to be a Thorne anymore. I'm keeping the dress, though. Consider it severance pay. She turned to walk away, expecting Julius to be furious, expecting security to grab her, expecting the end. She walked past Julius. He was standing still, his head bowed. Julius, she said softly. I'm sorry it had to happen this way. But I couldn't let them win. She took a step down the altar stairs. Wait. Julius's voice stopped her. It wasn't angry. It was commanding. He turned around to face the congregation, then turned back to Elise. He reached into his tuxedo pocket. Elise braced herself. Was he going to attack her? Serve her with a lawsuit? Julius pulled out a microphone from his own pocket. He had been wired up the whole time. He looked at his mother, who was sobbing in rage, and his father, who was holding his cheek, and Chloe, who was being restrained by a confused usher. Then he looked at Elise. And he smiled. It was the first genuine smile she had seen on him in months. You missed one thing, Elise, Julius said. Elise frowned. What? You didn't need to hire the private investigator, Julius said, his voice booming through the church. I already had all those files. In fact, who do you think sent you the initial tip about the cloud server? Elise froze. The entire church went silent again. The drama had just taken a turn no one expected. You, Elise whispered. Julius stepped closer to her, ignoring his screaming family. I knew about the embezzlement my mother was doing to fund her lifestyle. I knew about my father's affair with Chloe for 6 months. I knew they were planning to frame you. But I couldn't just leave. If I left, they would have destroyed you. They would have used their lawyers to bury you, ruin your reputation, ensure you never worked again. He took her hand. I needed them to destroy themselves, Julius said, his eyes fierce. I needed them to do it publicly, irreversibly. I needed a stage big enough that they couldn't bribe their way out of the scandal. So I let the wedding planning continue. I leaked the password to you. I left the trail of breadcrumbs. He looked out at the stunned crowd, at the press reporters who were now frantically typing on their phones. Ladies and gentlemen, Julius announced, as of this morning, holding the power of attorney granted to me by the board in light of ethical violations by the current CEO, violations which you have just witnessed, I am removing Andrew Thorne as CEO of Thorne Enterprises. I am also freezing Victoria Thorne's assets, pending an investigation into corporate theft. He turned back to Elise, dropping to one knee. I didn't bring you here to marry you into this snake pit, Elise, Julius said, his voice trembling with emotion. I brought you here to help me burn it down so we could build something new. From the ashes, he pulled a different ring box from his pocket. This wasn't the gaudy family heirloom Victoria had forced him to use. It was a simple, elegant platinum band with a rare blue diamond. "Elise Vance," Julius said. "Now that the trash has been taken out, will you marry me? Just me. Not the company, not the family. Just the man who loves you enough to destroy his own legacy to save you." The silence in St. Patrick's Cathedral was heavy, the kind of silence that usually precedes a natural disaster. Elise looked down at Julius, the man kneeling before her. The chaos of the last 10 minutes, the exposed affair, the secret baby, the corporate theft, seemed to swirl around them like a hurricane, but in the eye of the storm, it was just the two of them. She looked at the simple platinum ring. It wasn't a showpiece. It was a promise. "You risked everything," Elise whispered, her voice trembling. "You risked your company, your reputation. Why didn't you just tell me?" "Because if I told you," Julius said, his eyes searching hers, "you would have tried to be noble. You would have left quietly to save me the embarrassment. I didn't want you to leave, Elise. I wanted you to fight. I needed to know that you could stand next to me when the wolves come. Because after today, they will come." Elise looked at Victoria, who was currently shrieking at a security guard, and Andrew, who was frantically typing on his phone, likely trying to move assets offshore before the feds froze them. She looked at Chloe, who was slumped in the pew, weeping into her hands, abandoned by both her lovers. Elise laughed. It was a wet, breathless sound. "You're crazy, Julius Thorne." "I'm desperate," he corrected, "desperately in love with you." "Yes," Elise said, her voice gaining strength. "Yes, I'll marry you. But if you ever keep a secret like this from me again, I'll take half your empire." "Deal," Julius grinned. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. He stood up and kissed her. It wasn't the polite, staged kiss of a society wedding. It was fierce, possessive, and desperate. The congregation, shaking off their shock, began to murmur. Then, a few of Elise's friends from her old neighborhood in Queens, the ones seated in the back row who had been ignored by the ushers, started clapping. The applause swelled, awkward at first, then thunderous. But the applause was cut short by the wail of sirens. The heavy oak doors of the cathedral burst open. It wasn't the paparazzi. It was the NYPD. Leading the pack was Detective Miller, a man with a tired face and a trench coat that looked like it had seen too many crime scenes. Behind him were 6 uniformed officers. "Andrew Thorne, Victoria Thorne!" Miller's voice boomed, bouncing off the vaulted ceilings. Victoria froze. She smoothed her dress, regaining a shred of her icy composure. "Finally the police. Officer, arrest this girl. She has hacked my private servers and defamed my character." Detective Miller walked right past Elise and stopped in front of Victoria. He pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. "Victoria Thorne, you are under arrest for grand larceny, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit fraud. We have the wire transfers, ma'am, the ones you tried to hide in the Cayman Islands accounts under your maid's name." Victoria's jaw dropped. That's preposterous. Do you know who I am?" "Yeah, I do," Miller deadpanned. "You're the lady who's about to spend her wedding night in central booking. Turn around." As the officer cuffed Victoria, she began to scream. It was a raw, animalistic sound that stripped away her veneer of high society. "Julius, do something. I am your mother. I did this for you, to protect the bloodline." Julius looked at her, his face stone cold. "You didn't do it for me, Mother. You did it because you couldn't stand losing control. You'd rather see me miserable with Chloe than happy with someone you couldn't manipulate." "Andrew!" Victoria shrieked as they dragged her down the aisle. "Andrew, help me!" But Andrew Thorne had his own problems. 2 officers were boxing him in. "Andrew Thorne," Detective Miller said, turning to the patriarch, We have a warrant for your arrest regarding securities fraud and insider trading. It seems your private meetings with Ms. St. James involved trading confidential merger details for personal favors." Andrew turned purple. "This is entrapment. My lawyers will have your badges by morning. Julius, tell them this is a mistake." Julius adjusted his cufflinks. "Actually, Father, I can't. I handed over the evidence myself. It was part of the internal audit I commissioned last week. You really shouldn't have signed those documents while you were distracted at the hotel with Chloe." Andrew lunged at his son, but the officers grabbed him. The once great CEO was hauled away, cursing and spitting. That left Chloe. She sat alone in the pew, surrounded by empty space, as the other guests recoiled from her as if she were radioactive. She looked up at Julius, tears streaming down her face, mascara running in black streaks. "Julius," she whimpered, I'm pregnant. It's a Thorn baby. You can't let them take me. The stress. It's bad for the baby." Julius looked at her with a mixture of pity and disgust. "If that baby is real, Chloe, and if it really is my father's, then the Thorn estate will provide child support in accordance with the law. But you're on your own. You wanted to be part of the family so badly. Congratulations. You're now the stepmother I never wanted." He turned to Elise, offering his arm. "Ready to go, Mrs. Thorn?" Elise hitched up her dress. "Get me out of here. I need a cheeseburger and a very large vodka." As they walked down the aisle, past the flashing cameras of the press who had snuck in during the chaos, past the stunned socialites, Elise felt a weight lift off her shoulders. They stepped out into the bright New York sunlight. The Rolls-Royce was waiting, but Julius shook his head at the driver. "Not today, Jenkins." He grabbed Elise's hand and pulled her toward a yellow taxi that was idling on Fifth Avenue. He knocked on the window. "Queens," Julius told the shocked driver, "and step on it." 3 days had passed since the Red Wedding of Fifth Avenue, as the tabloids were calling it. The internet was broken. The clips of Victoria's arrest had more views than the Super Bowl. Memes of Andrew getting slapped by his wife were trending globally, and the photo of Julius and Elise eating pizza in a hole-in-the-wall spot in Queens, still in their wedding attire, had become the defining image of modern romance. But inside the penthouse of the Summit Tower, a property Julius had bought secretly under a shell company, the mood was tense. The penthouse was a fortress of glass and steel overlooking Central Park. It was modern, stark, and completely secure. This was their bunker. Elise sat at the kitchen island, wearing one of Julius's dress shirts, scrolling through her iPad. "Your mother's bail was set at $5 million. She posted it an hour ago." Julius was pacing the living room, a phone pressed to his ear. He looked tired. He hadn't slept much. Taking down a dynasty was exhausting work. "I know," Julius said to the person on the phone. "Freeze the accounts, all of them. If she tries to buy so much as a pack of gum, I want to know about it." "Thanks, Silas." He hung up and rubbed his temples. "Silas says Andrew is out too. His legal team is arguing that the evidence was obtained illegally because you hacked the server." "I didn't hack it," Elise reminded him, pouring him a cup of coffee. "I guessed the password. That's not hacking. That's just being smarter than a boomer." Julius cracked a smile, taking the coffee. He leaned in and kissed her forehead. "They're going to come at us hard, Elle. Andrew still has friends on the board. Old money protects its own. They're calling an emergency shareholder meeting tomorrow morning to vote on my position as interim CEO. They want to oust me. Can they?" "It's going to be close," Julius admitted. "Andrew owns 30% of the voting stock. Victoria owns 15%. I have 20%. The rest is public. If they convince the other shareholders that I'm unstable, that I torpedoed the family image for a lover's quarrel, they could vote me out. If that happens, Andrew gets reinstated and he'll fire me. Then he'll sue us into oblivion." Elise set down her mug. The fire returned to her eyes. "So we need to convince the shareholders that keeping Andrew is a liability." "Exactly. But Andrew is charming. He's already spinning the narrative. He's telling people the video was a deep fake, that I've been brainwashed by a gold digger." Suddenly, the intercom buzzed. The concierge's voice filtered through. "Mr. Thorne, there is a Ms. Chloe St. James here to see you. She says it's a medical emergency." Julius and Elise exchanged a look. "Let her up," Julius said, after a long pause. "If she's playing games, we'll know." 5 minutes later, the elevator doors slid open. Chloe walked in. She looked nothing like the polished socialite from the wedding. She was wearing sweatpants, a hoodie, and no makeup. Her eyes were red and puffy. She looked young and terrified. "I didn't know where else to go," Chloe whispered, hugging her arms around herself. "Cut the act, Chloe," Elise said, standing up. "You tried to ruin my life. Why should we help you?" "Because he cut me off," Chloe sobbed. "Andrew, he called me this morning. He said I was a loose end. He offered me $100,000 to get an abortion and sign an NDA. He said if I kept the baby, he'd make sure I never worked in this town again. He said he'd ruin my father's political career." Julius leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "And you want what? Money from us?" "No," Chloe shook her head frantically. "I want revenge. And I have something you need." "We have everything we need," Julius said dismissively. "We have the photos, the DNA test. You have the affair," Chloe interrupted. "But you don't have the bribes." The room went silent. "What bribes?" Julius asked, his voice dropping an octave. Chloe reached into her purse and pulled out a small flash drive. "Andrew didn't just sleep with me because he liked me. He used my father. My father is on the Senate Zoning Committee. Andrew needed permits for the new port expansion in New Jersey, permits that were denied because of environmental regulations." Elise's eyes widened. "He bribed a senator." "He used me as the conduit," Chloe admitted, her voice trembling. "He gave me gifts, cars, jewelry, cash. I was supposed to pass the cash to my dad's campaign fund. In exchange, the zoning laws were changed. If this gets out, my dad goes to jail. Andrew goes to federal prison for bribery. Not just fraud. Bribery of a public official." "Why give this to us?" Elise asked softly. "You're implicating your own father." "My father called me a whore this morning," Chloe said, her face hardening. "He told me to take Andrew's money and disappear. He doesn't care about me or this baby. I'm done being a pawn. I want to burn them, just like you did." Julius walked over and took the flash drive. He held it up to the light. This was the nail in the coffin. Fraud was one thing. Bribing a U.S. senator was a guaranteed 10 to 20-year sentence. It was the nuclear option. "If we use this," Julius said, looking at Chloe, "you will be implicated. You could face charges." "I know," Chloe said. "I'll cut a deal. Immunity for testimony. I want Andrew to pay, and I want my baby to be safe from him." Julius looked at Elise. This was a turning point. They could win, but the collateral damage would be massive. "Do it," Elise said without hesitation. "They wouldn't hesitate to destroy us." Julius nodded. He plugged the drive into his laptop. "I'm calling Silas. We're not waiting for the shareholder meeting. We're releasing this to the DOJ tonight." Just as he hit send on the email to his lawyer, a loud crash echoed from the front of the building. The glass walls of the penthouse offered a panoramic view, but they also offered no hiding place. "What was that?" Elise asked. Julius ran to the window. Down below, on the street, a black van had rammed into the lobby entrance of the summit tower. Men in masks were pouring out. "Security breach!" The automated system blared. "Lockdown initiated." "They're not waiting for the meeting either," Julius swore. "Andrew sent a clean-up crew. He knows Chloe is here." He grabbed Elise's hand. "We have to go. Now." "Where?" Elise cried as the elevator locked down. "The roof," Julius said, pulling her toward the stairs. "The helicopter pad. I kept the chopper on standby, just in case." "In case of what?" "In case my father decided to stop acting like a CEO and start acting like a mob boss." They sprinted up the spiral staircase as the sound of heavy boots echoed from the hallway below. The door to the penthouse splintered. Andrew's fixers were inside. This wasn't just a corporate battle anymore. It was a hunt. The stairwell was cold, concrete, and echoed with the terrifying sound of heavy boots pounding on the steps below. Julius Thorne, a man who had spent his life in boardrooms and galas, was now sprinting up the service stairs of his own building, gripping the hand of his wife in one hand and dragging his father's pregnant mistress with the other. "I can't," Chloe gasped, stumbling on the landing of the 40th floor. She was pale, clutching her stomach. "I can't run anymore." "You have to," Elise snapped, pulling her up. The adrenaline had stripped away Elise's fear, leaving only a sharp, survivalist instinct. "If those men catch us, that baby doesn't have a future. Move!" Julius pushed open the heavy fire door to the roof. The wind hit them instantly, a gale-force gust that whipped Elise's hair across her face. Above the wind, the rhythmic thwop-thwop-thwop of a helicopter rotor cut through the night. "Mac!" Julius yelled, waving his arms. A sleek black Eurocopter sat on the helipad, its blades spinning. The pilot, a gruff Scotsman named Mac, who had served as Julius's personal transport for years, saw them and immediately began revving the engine to take off power. They ran across the gravel roof. The door behind them burst open with a metallic crash. 3 men in tactical gear spilled onto the roof. They weren't police. They weren't security. They were cleaners. Illegal contractors Andrew used when legal threats failed. "Stop!" one of the men shouted, raising a weapon that looked suspiciously like a taser rifle. "Get in!" Julius shoved Chloe into the back seat of the chopper. Elise scrambled in after her. Julius dove into the co-pilot seat, slamming the door shut, just as a probe sparked against the glass. "Go, Mac! Go!" Julius commanded. The helicopter lurched upward, banking hard to the left. Elise looked down through the window. The men on the roof were growing smaller, frustrated ants shaking their fists at the sky. They disappeared into the glittering grid of the Manhattan skyline as the chopper soared over Central Park. Inside the cabin, the noise was deafening, but the silence between the passengers was louder. Chloe was curled in a ball, sobbing. Elise was staring out the window, watching the city lights blur. "Where are we going?" Elise asked into her headset. "The police station?" Julius shook his head, his voice coming through the intercom. "Not yet. Andrew has friends in the NYPD brass. If we land at a precinct tonight with you and Chloe, we'll be separated for questioning. By the time they let us go, the flash drive will be lost, and Chloe will be coerced into recanting. We need neutral ground." "So where?" "New Jersey," Julius said grimly. "An old shipping container yard Thorne Enterprises owns. It's off the books. My father thinks it's abandoned. It's the only place he won't look." They landed 20 minutes later in a desolate industrial park in Newark. The contrast was jarring, from the luxury of the Plaza Hotel to the grime of a shipping yard in less than 72 hours. Mac killed the engine. "I'll stand guard, boss," he said, pulling a pistol from under his seat. "Nobody gets near the perimeter." Inside the small, dusty office of the warehouse, Julius finally collapsed onto a creaky chair. He looked at Elise. Her Vera Wang wedding dress was torn at the hem, stained with grease from the helicopter door. She had lost her tiara somewhere on the stairs. She looked magnificent. "I'm sorry," Julius said, his voice thick with guilt. "This isn't exactly the honeymoon I promised." Elise walked over to him, straddling his lap and wrapping her arms around his neck. "Are you kidding? We just outran a hit squad in a helicopter. This is the most exciting date I've ever been on." She kissed him, a slow, reassuring kiss that grounded him. From the corner of the room, a sniffle broke the moment. Chloe was sitting on a stack of old manifest logs, looking miserable. "I'm hungry," Chloe whispered. Elise sighed. She walked over to a vending machine in the corner that looked like it hadn't been restocked since 2005. She kicked it hard. A bag of stale pretzels fell out. She tossed them to Chloe. "Eat up, princess. We have a long night ahead of us." Julius pulled out his laptop and connected it to the warehouse's spotty Wi-Fi. "The shareholder meeting starts at 9 a.m. tomorrow. We have 8 hours to build a case that destroys Andrew Thorne once and for all. We're not just going to present evidence. We're going to stage a coup." "How?" Elise asked, pulling up a chair. "We draft a press release," Julius said, his eyes scanning documents on the screen. "We upload the audio of the bribery to a secure server set to auto-publish to the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and the FBI tip line at exactly 9:50 a.m. But first, we have to walk into that meeting and look them in the eye." "They won't let us in," Chloe said, chewing on a pretzel. "Andrew will have security tighter than the White House." Julius looked at his watch. A dangerous glint appeared in his eye. "Andrew thinks in terms of doors and elevators. He thinks in terms of permission. We're not asking for permission anymore." He turned to Elise. "Do you trust me?" "Always," she said. "Good. Because we're going to make an entrance they'll never forget." The boardroom of Thorne Tower was a masterpiece of intimidation. Located on the 80th floor, it featured a mahogany table long enough to land a plane on, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view of the empire the Thorne family controlled. At 9 a.m. sharp, the room was full. The board of directors, 12 men and women representing billions of dollars in capital, sat in silence. Andrew Thorne stood at the head of the table. He looked immaculate in a navy Brioni suit, though the bags under his eyes were heavy. Victoria sat nearby, wearing dark sunglasses indoors, her demeanor icy. "Ladies and gentlemen," Andrew began, his voice smooth and authoritative, "I apologize for the theatrical nature of recent events. My son, Julius, has unfortunately suffered a mental breakdown. The pressure of the succession was too much for him. The woman he married is a grifter who has manipulated his fragile state to extort this family." A murmur went through the room. One of the board members, a stout man named Mr. Henderson, cleared his throat. "Andrew, the video at the church, it was quite convincing. And the arrest?" "A misunderstanding," Andrew waved a hand dismissively. "The charges against Victoria have already been dropped due to lack of evidence. It was a deepfake attack orchestrated by corporate rivals. As for my son, I am moving to have him removed from all executive functions immediately. We cannot have a volatile leader at the helm." "I second the motion," Victoria said, her voice like grinding glass. "All in favor of removing Julius Thorne and reinstating Andrew Thorne as permanent CEO?" Andrew asked, scanning the room. Hands began to raise. 1, 2, 5. Andrew smiled. He had won. He always won. Crash. The sound of shattering glass exploded through the room. The board members screamed and ducked. A window cleaner's platform swung violently against the exterior of the 80th floor window, but it wasn't a window cleaner. Standing on the platform, suspended 800 feet in the air, was Julius Thorne. Next to him was Elise. Julius raised a heavy steel glass breaker tool and swung it with all his might against the reinforced glass. Crack! "He's insane!" Victoria screamed, jumping up. "He's going to kill us all!" Julius swung again. The glass spiderwebbed. One more kick, and the entire pane gave way, showering the expensive carpet in diamonds of safety glass. The wind roared into the boardroom, scattering papers everywhere. Julius stepped through the broken window, brushing shards of glass from the shoulder of his tuxedo jacket. He reached back and helped Elise inside. She was wearing a fresh white pantsuit, stolen from the emergency wardrobe on the helicopter, looking like an avenging angel. "Sorry we're late," Julius said, his voice calm over the howling wind. Traffic was a nightmare. Security guards burst through the double doors, guns drawn. "Stand down," Julius barked. The command was so forceful, so filled with natural authority, that the guards hesitated. "If you touch me, you are assaulting the acting CEO. And unless this board has finished voting, I am still the CEO." Andrew's face was a mask of purple rage. "Get him out! Arrest him!" "Sit down, Andrew," Elise said. She walked to the center of the room, seemingly unafraid of the armed guards or the gaping hole in the skyscraper. She tossed a small flash drive onto the mahogany table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped right in front of Mr. Henderson. "What is this?" Henderson asked, looking terrified. "That," Elise said, "is the reason Thorne Enterprises stock is about to drop 40% if you don't act in the next 5 minutes. It's a recording of Andrew Thorne bribing Senator St. James." Andrew lunged for the drive, but Julius stepped in his path, shoving his father back into his chair. "Don't embarrass yourself further." "It's a lie," Andrew shouted. "Another deep fake." "Is it?" Julius asked. He pulled out his phone. "Because I just emailed the file to the Department of Justice, and—" He pointed to the large monitor on the wall, usually used for stock tickers. "I also live-streamed the audio to our internal employee network. Every secretary, janitor, and junior analyst in this building just heard you offer $100,000 to bypass EPA regulations." The room went deathly silent. Then the doors opened again, but it wasn't security. It was Chloe St. James. She walked in slowly, flanked by 2 FBI agents. Andrew's face went white. Victoria let out a small, strangled gasp. "Chloe?" Andrew whispered. Chloe looked at the man she had thought she loved. "You wanted me to get an abortion, Andrew. You wanted me to disappear. So I did. I disappeared into witness protection." She turned to the board. "I am turning state's evidence. I have delivered the ledger of bribes, the dates, the offshore accounts. It's all over." Mr. Henderson looked at Andrew, then at the flash drive. He slowly lowered his hand. "I withdraw my vote," Henderson said coldly. "Me too," said another board member. One by one, the hands went down. Julius walked to the head of the table. He looked down at his father. "The board has a decision to make. You can keep Andrew and go down with the ship when the indictment hits in about 20 minutes. Or you can accept his immediate resignation, appoint me as permanent CEO, and we cooperate fully with the investigation to save the company." Andrew looked at Victoria. She refused to meet his eyes. She was already calculating her own survival, distancing herself from her husband. "You ungrateful brat," Andrew hissed. "I built this." "And you sold it out," Julius replied. "Pack your things, Dad. The feds are waiting in the lobby." The FBI agents moved forward. "Andrew Thorne, you are under arrest for federal bribery, conspiracy and racketeering." As they handcuffed the titan of industry, Andrew looked small, old, defeated. He was led out of the room in silence, the only sound the clicking of the cuffs. Victoria stood up, smoothing her skirt. "Well," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "It seems mistakes were made. Julius, darling, surely we can discussion my role as—" "You're fired, Mother," Julius said without looking at her. "Excuse me. You're fired from the board. You're stripped of your executive privileges. Your access cards are deactivated. Security will escort you out." Victoria stared at him, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "You can't do this. I am your mother." "You were never a mother," Julius said softly. "You were a manager, and your contract is terminated." Victoria looked at Elise. She expected gloating. She expected mockery. Elise just looked tired. "Goodbye, Victoria." Victoria Thorne, the Queen of Fifth Avenue, let out a sob of pure frustration and stormed out, her heels clicking angrily against the floor, followed closely by a security guard. The room was quiet, save for the wind whistling through the broken window. Julius turned to the board. "I suggest we take a recess. We have a lot of work to do to rebuild trust, and I need to get that window fixed." He took Elise's hand. "But first, I need a coffee." 6 months had passed since the boardroom coup that shook Wall Street. The scaffolding was finally down from the 80th floor window of Thorne Tower, and the glass had been replaced with reinforced panes. But the transparency Julius Thorne had promised wasn't just physical, it was systemic. The Thorne Purge, as the financial news called it, had been brutal but necessary. Julius had fired 40% of the upper management, cronies of his father who were used to 3 martini lunches and looking the other way. In their place, he hired young, hungry, ethical talent. The stock price, which had plummeted initially, had not only recovered but hit an all-time high. But for Elise, the real victory wasn't in the stock market ticker. It was in the silence. She sat on the terrace of their new brownstone in Brooklyn Heights. They had sold the penthouse. It felt too much like a fortress, too disconnected from the world. This house had creaky floors, a garden full of wild flowers, and neighbors who actually said, "Hello?" Julius walked out onto the terrace, holding 2 mugs of tea. He looked different now. The perpetual furrow between his brows was gone. He wore a cashmere sweater and jeans, a stark cry from the armored suits of his past. "A letter came for you," Julius said, handing her a cream-colored envelope. It had no return address, just a postmark from Bozeman, Montana. Elise took it, her heart skipping a beat. She knew who it was from. She tore it open. Inside was a photo of a baby girl with bright blue eyes, Andrew's eyes, and a short, handwritten note. "Her name is Mia. She's beautiful and she's innocent. Thank you for the money for the fresh start. I don't deserve it, but she does. I won't bother you again." "See." Elise looked at the photo. Chloe had the baby. Julius looked over her shoulder. "She looks healthy." "She is," Elise said softly. "Do you regret it? Helping her?" After the trial, where Chloe's testimony had been crucial in locking Andrew away for 15 years, Julius had quietly set up a trust fund for the child. It was anonymous, managed by a third party. Chloe received a monthly stipend, enough to live comfortably, but not extravagantly, on the condition that she stay out of New York and never speak to the press again. "No," Julius said. "That baby is my half-sister, technically. It's not her fault her father is a monster, and her mother was lost. Breaking the cycle means taking care of the innocent, even when it's hard." "Speaking of the monster," Elise asked, sipping her tea, "any news?" "Andrew is adjusting to life at the Federal Correctional Institution in Danbury," Julius said with a grim satisfaction. "Apparently he tried to bribe a guard for extra dessert and got thrown in solitary for a week. He's learning that his checkbook has no power there." "And Victoria?" Julius chuckled darkly. "That's the best part. Since her assets were seized to pay the SEC fines and the civil lawsuits, she had to downsize. She's living in a one-bedroom condo in Boca Raton. Her neighbors are retired school teachers who don't care about her pedigree. I heard she tried to organize a home owners association coup and was voted down unanimously. She has no audience, Elle. For a narcissist, that's a fate worse than prison. Elise leaned back, looking at the Manhattan skyline across the river. It looked beautiful from a distance. We did it. We actually burned it down and survived. Not just survived, Julius corrected. He knelt beside her chair. We flourished. He reached into his pocket. You know, we never did finish that ceremony at St. Patrick's. The priest ran away before we got to the I do part. Elise smiled. I think the I do was implied when I helped you hijack a helicopter. I want to say it, though, Julius said, his eyes intense and full of love. I want to say it without the cameras, without the guests, without the drama. He took her hand. Elise Vance, you are the strongest person I know. You saved me from becoming my father. You taught me that loyalty isn't about blind obedience. It's about standing up for the truth. I promise to honor you, to protect you, and to never, ever keep a secret from you again. I love you. Tears pricked Elise's eyes. I love you, Julius Thorne. And I promise to keep life interesting, though maybe less smashing windows interesting for a while. I can live with that, he laughed. Good, Elise said, placing his hand on her stomach. Because we're going to be busy. Julius froze. His hand rested on the soft fabric of her dress. He looked up at her, his eyes wide. Elise, are you? 8 weeks, she whispered. And we don't need a DNA test for this one. Julius let out a shout of pure joy, a sound that echoed off the Brooklyn brownstones. He scooped her up in his arms, spinning her around on the terrace. A baby, he gasped, burying his face in her neck. A real family. A new legacy, Elise corrected him. No schemes, no lies. Just us. Julius set her down and looked at her, his face beaming. Just us. As the sun set over the city, painting the sky in hues of purple and gold, the shadows of the past finally lengthened and disappeared. The Thorne dynasty, the old, rotten version of it, was dead. But in the garden of a brownstone in Brooklyn, something new was taking root. It wasn't built on gold or fear. It was built on the truth, and it was unbreakable. So there you have it. Elise didn't just expose a cheating husband. She dismantled an entire empire of corruption. From the shocking video at the altar to the high-stakes helicopter escape, she proved that you should never underestimate the scholarship girl. The Thornes thought they could crush her, but instead they forged her into the diamond that cut them down. Andrew is in prison. Victoria is living her worst nightmare of irrelevance, and Julius and Elise are building a legacy based on love, not lies. It's a reminder that the truth always comes out. Sometimes it just needs a projector screen and a microphone. Wow, what a roller coaster. If your jaw dropped when Andrew was exposed as the baby daddy, hit that like button right now. I want to know what you would have done. Would you have forgiven Chloe and set up a trust fund for her baby like Julius did? Or would you have left her to fend for herself? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of revenge and redemption, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. We post new, dramatic stories every week, and you don't want to miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and remember, keep your secrets safe, or someone might just play them at your wedding.